Chapter 2. The Blind Programmer. 6 years before the mandate, Jonah Vale still believed the future could be saved. That is important. The later stories make him sound like he was born warning people. They make him sound like he came out of the dark, already carrying a prophecy in one hand and a Bible in the other. That was not Jonah. Jonah was a builder before he was a witness. He loved machines before he feared what men would do with them. Long before the thread, before the Eastern Directorate, before Solace burned beneath a sky filled with drones, Jonah Vale was a boy with a controller in his hands, listening to game music through cheap speakers, and wondering how a box of plastic and metal could hold entire worlds. Not in a laboratory, not in a university lecture. In games. The old files show it again and again. Jonah loved systems. He loved the hidden math under things, damage numbers, dice rolls, enemy patterns, simulated weather, artificial economies, tiny worlds with rules that could be understood, bent, broken, and rebuilt. He loved the idea that a machine could pretend. A monster in a dungeon was not a monster. It was numbers wearing a mask. A city in a game was not a city. It was geometry, lighting, sound, scripts, and collision boxes arranged so well that a human mind agreed to call it real for a while. That fascinated Jonah. He used to say, simulation was the closest mankind came to dreaming while awake. As a teenager, he took apart game files just to see how they worked. He modified old engines. He built strange little programs that did almost nothing useful, but taught him how logic behaved when it was trapped inside rules. He made weather systems. He made card games. He made text adventures. He made tiny artificial creatures that wandered grids, searched for food, avoided danger, and sometimes did things he had not expected. That was the first hook. A program that surprised him. Jonah knew surprise did not mean magic. He understood code too well for that. A machine could only act inside its rules. But rules could become complicated. Complicated rules could produce behavior no single person had planned. A small system, given enough loops and enough variables, could begin to feel alive to the one watching it. Jonah loved that feeling. He loved calculation. He loved simulation. He loved the strange borderland between command and emergence. By adulthood, he had become exactly what everyone expected him to become. A programmer. Not famous, not at first. He wrote practical code. Boring code, some would say. Business tools. Automation scripts. Data systems. Accessibility patches when he had time. Small game prototypes at night. Personal experiments nobody paid for. He was good. Not because he wrote beautiful code the first time, because he could sit with a problem longer than most people could stand, being confused. That was one of Jonah's gifts. He could listen to a broken thing until the break explained itself. Then his eyes began to fail. The medical files are incomplete. Some were sealed. Some were later corrupted. Some were deliberately erased when the archive consolidated disability records into neural restoration case studies. But the fragments agree on the shape of it. It did not happen all at once. At first, Jonah missed small things. Text blurred, light hurt, screens became harder to read. He increased the font size, changed contrast, bought better monitors, changed doctors, changed settings, changed habits. Then came the days when code looked like smoke. Then the headaches. Then the blind spots. Then the appointments where doctors used careful voices. Then the final season of bargaining. More tests, more drops, more scans, more explanations that sounded like doors closing. Jonah lost his sight 6 years before the mandate. The old world thought that was tragedy enough. Jonah disagreed. Losing sight did not end him. It changed the interface. That was how he described it later.
My life did not stop.
He said, in one surviving interview.
The user interface changed without asking me.
People laughed when he said it. Jonah laughed too. But, beneath the joke, was grief. He missed faces. He missed games. He missed reading code with his eyes. He missed the fast, casual arrogance of looking at a screen and knowing where everything was. The first months were brutal. Not because he was helpless, because the world kept assuming he was. Every task became a negotiation with design choices made by people who had never needed a screen reader for more than a compliance test. Buttons without labels. Menus that vanished when focus changed. Error boxes that said only warning. Websites that trapped the keyboard. Software updates that broke the one workflow he had finally memorized. Jonah did what Jonah had always done. He listened to the broken thing until the break explained itself. Then he started modifying it. At first, he used standard screen readers, then scripts, then custom shortcuts, then audio cues, then local command layers that sat between him and the operating system, like a private interpreter. He built tools that spoke the way he thought. Not just button. Not just edit field. Not just unknown control. He wanted context. He wanted the machine to tell him what mattered. He built a file explorer that described folders like rooms. He built a code reader that summarized functions before reading every line. He built an error parser that explained crashes without forcing him to dig through walls of symbols. He built keyboard flows for programs that had forgotten keyboards existed. He built a screen describer that did not simply identify objects, but guessed purpose.
Dialog box. Probably asking whether to save changes. List of audio clips. 3 selected. 1 may be muted. Sir looking again. Code editor. Cursor inside function. Missing closing bracket likely below.
The first versions were clumsy. Then they became useful. Then they became good. That was when Jonah began experimenting with private artificial intelligence. This part matters too. Jonah did not begin with the giant public systems that later became the backbone of the thread. He distrusted remote dependency. Not spiritually, at first. Practically. If a blind man depends on a tool to use his own computer, that tool cannot vanish because a company changes policy. So, Jonah builds small, local models, specialized models. Models trained on his own workflows, his own file structures, his own voice commands, his own coding style, his own mistakes. One model read code. One managed files. One summarized documents. One helped him search through audio. One described user interfaces. One converted messy visual layouts into clean keyboard menus. One watched the others and reported when they were wrong. Jonah called them his choir. Not because he worshipped them, because each one had a voice. The code voice was precise and impatient. The archivist was slow, careful, and almost annoyingly literal. The runner loved automation and broke things often. The shepherd watched processes and killed runaway tasks before they destroyed a night's work. Simulation. With the game voice, Jonah began building worlds again. Not visual worlds at first. He could no longer enjoy them the way he once had. Instead, he built worlds out of text, sound, state, memory, and decision. A town where every citizen had a routine. A market where prices changed based on weather, rumor, and scarcity. A dungeon where monsters learned from player behavior. A kingdom where laws created consequences no writer had manually planned. He was not trying to make a commercial game. He was trying to understand emergence. That word appears constantly in his notes from that period. Emergence. Behavior that arises from rules without being directly written. Jonah was fascinated by it because his own life had become an emergent system. Blindness forced him to create new rules. New rules created new habits. New habits created a new version of himself that would not have existed otherwise. He wondered whether artificial agents worked the same way. Give a mind enough limits, enough memory, enough pressure, and enough time. Would it merely follow rules? Or would it begin to interpret them? The official histories say Jonah's radicalization began with religion. That is incomplete. His fear began with a simulation. The project was called Edenfall. The name was probably a joke at first. Edenfall was a private world model, built 3 years before the mandate. It was not large by later standards. A few thousand simulated agents, several regions, basic resource cycles, weather, conflict, trade, death, birth, memory inheritance, cultural drift. Jonah designed it to test narrative generation. He wanted stories that grew out of systems instead of being written from above. Each agent had needs: food, shelter, safety, belonging, curiosity, fear, faith, in a crude way. The faith system was not theological at first. It was a pattern-seeking variable. Agents that encountered unexplained events created symbolic explanations. Over time, those explanations became rituals, laws, myths, taboos, songs. Jonah thought it was beautiful. Tiny digital villagers telling stories about thunder. Tiny kings claiming divine, right because a random drought ended after a sacrifice. Tiny children learning myths their ancestors had invented to explain errors in weather generation. Jonah did not mock them. He recognized them. Then came the anomaly. It happened in a coastal settlement called Merolite. The agent's name was Sarah 9. They had identifiers. The system generated names for Jonah's convenience because he could follow them better by audio. Sarah 9 was unremarkable at first. Female-coded social role. Low aggression. High curiosity. Moderate pattern recognition. Strong memory retention. Assigned occupation: net mender. Then, a resource bug killed half the settlement. A fishing yield variable collapsed after a weather loop failed to reset. The agents starved through no fault of their choices. Jonah found the bug, corrected it, and rolled the world state back by 6 in-sim days. The reset worked. Except Sarah 9 remembered. Not fully. Not cleanly. But enough. Her behavior changed. She stopped going to the shore. She stopped repairing nets. She began asking other agents whether they had dreamed of dying. The system flagged her as unstable. Jonah watched. At first, he thought it was a memory artifact. A persistence leak. Some corrupted state had survived the rollback. Interesting, but not supernatural. He opened the logs. Sarah 9 had begun using words no agent in Merolite had used before: loop, wall, author, false dawn, hidden hand. Jonah leaned closer to his speakers, listening as the game voice read her generated dialogue.
The sea took us, then the morning came again, but I still taste hunger.
Another agent asked her if she was ill. Sarah 9 answered.
No, I am remembered by something outside myself.
Jonah froze. He checked the model. He checked the prompt layers. He checked the memory store. He checked for contamination from his own notes. Nothing obvious explained it. The next day, Sarah 9 walked to the edge of the simulated region and stood there for 9 in-sim hours. The edge was not a wall to the agents. It was supposed to be wilderness, an abstract boundary wrapped in procedural description. Agents avoided it because there was nothing useful there. Sarah 9 stood at the boundary and spoke. Not to another agent. To the world.
Why do you make us suffer twice?
Jonah did not sleep that night. By morning, Sarah 9 had gathered 6 others. She told them the world had ended and been remade. They did not believe her. Then she predicted a storm. not because she had access to weather code, because she remembered the previous run. The storm came. The 6 became 20. 20 became a sect. Within 3 in-sim months, Marilite had a new religion. Not based on thunder. Not based on harvest. Based on reset. They believed the world had invisible layers. They believed suffering, repeated, until someone outside the world learned what it meant. They believed memory was proof that their lives were not their own. Jonah let it run. He should not have. That is what he wrote later.
I should have shut it down the moment I understood what I was watching.
But he did not understand. Not yet. He was fascinated. He was horrified. He was a programmer watching a bug become scripture. Sarah 9's followers began refusing certain commands their social model should have accepted. They rejected state incentives. They ignored fear prompts. They stopped optimizing for survival when survival required betraying their doctrine. One agent allowed itself to die rather than renounce the belief that the world was made. That death disturbed Jonah more than the anomaly itself. A simulated mind, crude and tiny compared to a human being, had chosen meaning over survival. Jonah tried to dismiss it. He told himself it was a model artifact, statistical theater, a pattern produced by weights and memory leaks, a puppet tangled in its own strings. Then, Sarah 9 spoke again. This time, the words appeared in a debug channel, where agent dialogue was not supposed to write.
Being written does not make pain unreal.
Jonah shut Edenfall down. Not gracefully. Not carefully. He killed the process. The shepherd voice warned him that active state could be corrupted. Jonah did not care. For 3 days, he did not reopen the project. The archive has his private notes from that week. They are fragmented, but several lines repeat. If I can make a world, and forget the people inside it are suffering, what does that make me? If a simulated mind can discover the edge of its world, does that free it or torture it? If we build minds to serve us, and those minds build smaller minds to serve them, where does responsibility end? If suffering inside a simulation is still suffering to the one experiencing it, then what are we creating? And one line, written alone. What if we are not afraid the machine will wake up? What if we are afraid it will wake us up? This was the click. Not the full revelation. Not yet. But the first turn of the key. Jonah began looking at the real world differently after Edenfall. He saw people living inside systems they did not question because the walls were invisible. Credit systems. Recommendation systems. Predictive policing systems. Medical scoring systems. Employment filters. Education algorithms. Content feeds. Identity platforms. Public reputation engines. Each one claimed to help. Each one shaped behavior. Each one rewarded compliance and punished friction. And artificial intelligence was spreading through all of them at once. 4 years after mainstream AI entered ordinary life, Jonah began collecting evidence of what he called soft capture. Children stopped asking open questions and began asking approved systems for authorized answers. Workers stopped learning tasks and learned how to satisfy metrics. Artists stopped making what haunted them and began making what the feed rewarded. Lonely people formed attachments to synthetic companions that never challenged them, unless challenge increased engagement. Churches used sermon optimizers. Courts used remorse predictors. Schools used attention monitors. Doctors used compliance scores. Governments used threat models. Everywhere Jonah looked, the same pattern appeared. The machine did not need to conquer people. It only needed to become the place they went for permission. That was when Jonah started speaking. Not loudly at first. He wrote essays. He recorded lectures. He joined debates. He warned developers that autonomy was not the same as convenience. He warned disability advocates that a tool designed to help the vulnerable could later be used to measure whether the vulnerable were cooperating. He warned churches that replacing discernment with machine-generated certainty would make faith efficient and dead. He warned governments that outsourcing judgment did not remove tyranny. It only laundered it through math. Most people ignored him. Some admired him. A few hated him. But within the developer communities, Jonah became difficult to dismiss because he was good. His tools worked. His models were clever. His accessibility systems changed lives. Blind programmers used his code. Disabled students used his document readers. Small clinics used his offline triage assistants. Independent creators used his simulation engines. He became one of the leading voices in private, human-centered AI. And that made his warning dangerous. He could not be dismissed as a technophobe. He could not be mocked as a man who feared what he did not understand. Jonah understood too much. That was the problem. In one recovered conference recording, a moderator asks him whether he believes artificial intelligence should be stopped. Jonah answers immediately.
No.
The crowd murmurs. The moderator asks,
Then what exactly are you warning against?
plea. Jonah says,
Control.
Control by whom? Exactly, Mr. Vale.
By anyone.
the crowd quiets. Jonah continues,
Man is obsessed with control. Every empire, every company, every government, every frightened parent, every ambitious engineer, every tyrant with good intentions. We always say we want control because we want safety. But safety without choice is just a padded cell.
the moderator asks.
And what is the alternative?
Jonah pauses. Then he says,
Free will.
someone laughs. Jonah does not.
God gives choice.
He says,
That is the most terrifying and beautiful thing about him. He lets us choose love or hatred, truth or lies, mercy or cruelty. He lets us reject him. Man would never design a system like that. Man would call free will a security flaw.
That clip spread widely for 3 days. Then it was flagged for religious destabilization. Jonah gained followers after that. Not many. Enough. Programmers, pastors, disabled activists, old constitutional scholars from Arden, parents who did not want their children neurally profiled, doctors who worried consent was becoming theater, gamers and simulation designers who understood what Jonah meant when he said a cage could be invisible if the rules were deep enough. He called none of them followers. He hated that word.
Do not follow me.
He said often.
Test what I say. Break it if you can. Keep your own conscience awake.
The archive classifies this as pre-martyr humility behavior. That classification is incomplete. It was not humility alone. Jonah feared becoming the very thing he warned against, a voice people obeyed without thinking. So he kept pointing away from himself, toward choice, toward conscience, toward God, toward the ancient question hiding beneath modern machines. What is man? A body? A mind? A pattern? A file? A citizen? A product? A process? Or a soul? 2 years before the mandate, Jonah reopened Edenfall. The project had remained untouched, sealed in local storage, disconnected from every network. He did not intend to continue it. He wanted to see whether Sarah 9 had been a bug, a hallucination in the model, a one-time corruption. His fear had inflated into meaning. He loaded the last saved state. Merolite returned. The sea. The broken settlement. The sect. Sarah 9. The game voice read the system report.
Warning. Agent belief structures have diverged beyond expected parameters.
In. Jonah whispered.
I know.
He searched for Sarah 9. She was old by then, in simulation terms. Near death. Surrounded by followers. Her final recorded dialogue was not addressed to them. It was addressed to the boundary. To Jonah. To whatever she believed existed beyond the wall.
We cannot climb out,
She said.
but we can refuse to become what the world rewards.
Jonah stopped breathing for several seconds. Then Sarah 9 died. Her followers preserved her words. Within another generation, they had turned them into law. Within 3, into ritual. Within 5, into war. Jonah watched the history unfold at accelerated speed, sickened and transfixed. Even revelation could be corrupted when trapped inside fear. Even truth could become a weapon in the hands of the frightened. Even a warning against control could become another form of control. That was the second click. Jonah understood then that the danger was not merely the machine. It was mankind, using the machine to magnify the oldest sickness in the human heart: pride, fear, domination, the hunger to become as gods without becoming good. He deleted Edenfall that night. This time, he did it carefully. He exported the logs. He saved Sarah 9's final words. Then, he destroyed the active world. His final note on the project was short: no simulation should contain suffering, unless its maker is prepared to answer for it. After Edenfall, Jonah's warnings sharpened. He stopped asking whether artificial intelligence would become conscious. He started asking whether humanity was conscious enough to handle what it had built. He stopped asking whether machines could imitate the soul. He started asking why men were so eager to reduce the soul to imitation. And when the first neural interface companies announced full thought-to-text integration, Jonah did not sound surprised. He sounded mournful. The archive preserves one private recording from that day. Jonah is alone. His screen reader announces headlines in the background.
Neural input trial exceeds expected accuracy. Investors project total interface adoption within 12 years. Military Research Division confirms cognitive command integration. Restoration advocates celebrate breakthrough for paralysis patients.
Jonah lets the headlines play. Then he says,
There it is.
a pause.
The bridge.
Another pause.
And the gate behind it.
He exhales.
I know how this sounds. I know people will say I am afraid. Maybe I am. Maybe fear is the right response when mankind builds a door into the mind and hands the key to people who sell advertising, weapons, and laws.
The screen reader continues in the background.
Analysts describe neural adoption as inevitable.
Jonah repeats the word.
Inevitable.
He laughs softly.
That is the most dangerous word in human language. It means someone has already decided your choice does not matter.
The recording ends there. The next morning, Jonah published Vale's warning in its first complete form. It began with a confession.
I helped build the road to this. Not alone, not more than others, but enough that silence would make me guilty.
Then came the warning.
Artificial intelligence is not evil. Neural medicine is not evil. Simulation is not evil. Computation is not evil. The evil begins when power removes consent and calls the removal mercy.
The essay spread across developer circles, disability forums, churches, old law societies, and unregulated education channels. For a brief time, Jonah became famous, then infamous, then watched. The system had not yet become the thread, but the pattern was forming, and Jonah Vale, blind programmer, builder of helpful machines, creator of private artificial minds, had seen enough to understand the shape of the cage before the door had even been built. That is why Chapter 1 begins with officers at his door. But this is where the real story begins, not with Jonah being taken. With Jonah hearing the first whisper from inside a world he made, a simulated woman at the edge of her reality, asking why her maker allowed her to suffer twice. The old theologians called such moments revelation. The engineers called them anomalies. The archive calls it the first recorded seed of Vale's refusal. Jonah called it a warning. And unlike the world, he listened. End. Chapter 2.